So yeah, so I think I'm going to start with telling you what this video is about. I've made videos in that, um, like in that format. Now I made one about politics where I debunked Silly Conversations democracy video, and about Arcane where I debunked stupid Arcane criticism. And much of this stupid Arcane criticism will be prevalent here. So you could watch that video, but it is, I'm warning you, it is 1 hour and 40 something minutes long. But yeah, this is about arcane politics and how arcane politics failed to be leftist, which I don't agree with. And yeah, I've had much of problems lately, like many problems lately. Like my editing program stopped working, it started demanding money, something like this, but yeah. And then also when I decided that I didn't need it, um, the recording software that I was using just also broke, so I needed to find another. And now I also can't edit the videos, so you're just getting that footage. I had already spent like an hour recording. One was like 20 minutes, the other was like 40 minutes. So yeah, I will just hope that this is going to work. Let's begin. This is that Arcane was always centrist, that it was not left wing, so alright. Oh.
It was January of 2022. I was bored at home between semesters of college and I needed something to do. I'd heard of this show on Netflix that had stunning animation, tight and impressive writing, and apparently even some leftist political commentary. So I checked it out. And I both was and wasn't impressed. I enjoyed Arcane's first season. I fell in love with the characters of Vi and Echo. They're still my favorites now. And I thought the animation was indeed gorgeous and the writing pretty great. The politics, though, well, this is a tweet I'd made on February 4th of 2022, a couple of weeks after watching the show. I just think the whole plot with Piltover versus Zahn was poorly done. First, we have Kate Vi, which I love, which is literally propaganda. Then we have Silco, who is supposed to be fighting for liberation, and yet he's now a drug dealer, I guess. The only ones who seem to be doing anything helpful are maybe Echo and the Firelights, but I don't know. But the whole framing of Zahn's problems just being Silco and not, their constant oppression by Piltover is just plain bad. As you can see, I did not hold any fantasies that the show would be a leftist masterpiece. There are things about these tweets I think differently about now, like Silco's character and what he represents, or Kate Vi because I don't like it at all anymore, not its canon version at least. But in general, what's important to note here is that I wasn't entirely convinced by the show's leftism. However,
Yeah, so because she already made several mistakes. So yeah, Silco. I'm later going to talk about Silco and how this is wrong because like arguing with here I kind of realized something very big that in fact this criticism is not very left wing. So yeah, let's
there are
continue.
many that were. One of the reasons I was not convinced was because I knew that my favorite character, Vi, was a cop in League of Legends, which is the game that Arcane is based on. Personally, I felt, and still do feel, that Vi becoming a cop makes no sense given the character we were presented with in Season 1.
That's a logical that's a logical continuation of that. You know why I'm so bored when I say this? Because I already debunked it, and I'm going to debunk it now anyway, and better than previously. So she joined already police, like the enforcers in season 1, in episode 8. So to make your worldview consistent, you should admit that at least this was also bad on the side of the writers. And yeah, she still refused to take that badge, uh, and only joined because she didn't want to be the enforcer. She, like, she joined it because of the circumstances. She wouldn't join it in any other combination of events. She joined them because that's how she could, get to Jinx, get her, find her, and also help Zone because they help Zone actually, which we also going to talk about later. And that's all.
especially its first two acts. But I knew that since Arcane was a League of Legends show, there was a high chance that she'd end up as an enforcer. And then the trailer for season 2 dropped, and I saw Vi in that accursed uniform, and I knew all was lost, and my excitement for season 2 was a double edged sword. But I never could have thought it would be this bad. Character assassinations left and right, zero accountability for a character instituting martial law, absurd and atrocious pacing, the utter defilement and
Yeah, obviously these are like average season 2 haters argument that I debunked in my video about Arcane. I told you this is going to be similar.
destruction of my favorite character, and more. From my
Like the destruction of Echo. Echo is literally like this is I'm not going to question that because that's just stupid.
understanding, because I don't really watch video essays, there have already been essays and videos out the ass about Arcane Season 2, and I'm sure that there are probably ones about what I'm going to talk about here today. But I still
Yeah, like that one about Silco that suggests that not suggests that just says to you that Silco and Jinx had a romantic relationship. Yeah, this guy is crazy. So yeah, probably someone who watched. I know that nobody watched it, but somebody who watched the previous video knows that I threatened to kill him. And I don't know what it is about this show, but it just makes me very emotional. And this also makes me very emotional because it's talking about ideology and about my favorite show. So prepare for me to scream at her.
wanted to throw my hat in the ring to talk about Arcane, both its first and second seasons, because I'd like to discuss why Arcane was always going to turn out this way, to a certain degree. In other words, this video is about why Arcane was always centrist.
So yeah, now she's going to talk about definitions. I hope we all know definitions. At least I know definitions, and I just want to skip it. Yeah.
As those of you watching likely remember, Arcane begins with a rather harrowing scene of two kids walking across a bridge covered in fire and ash, clearly the tail end of some kind of conflict. Dead bodies line the bridge. We see someone get killed by a person in uniform, what we'll later find out is an enforcer, the police force in the Arcane world. One of the kids sings a lullaby while we hear screams in the background. They see a large man pummeling an enforcer with gauntlets, and he directs them towards the bodies of their parents. The man
This is, I think, an honest mistake on her part because Vander wasn't an enforcer. So I hope this is an honest mistake on her part. So yeah.
man
Um,
drops his gauntlets, clearly a statement of him choosing not to fight, and he takes the kids into his arms, walking them away from the bridge, and the older child stares at the masked enforcers on the bridge as well as the skyline of the city above them, with clear rage and hatred. This is our introduction to the show. This is the taste that we as viewers are given as to what Arcane is going to be about. It sets the tone, it draws viewers in. Above all, this scene highlights two things. One, this show is going to be about these two sisters. I'm sure I don't need to talk about how season 2 utterly failed on that front.
no, it didn't. Like Vi and Jinx are like most important and one of them and most prioritized. Maybe not in like Act 3, but in like Act 1 and Act 2, they are like the most prioritized characters out there. in season 2, so I don't know what she's talking about really here.
And then, two, this show is going to be about the conflict between these two cities. This I will be talking about, of course. For this section of the video, I want to highlight what the show tells us about Zahn and Piltover right off the bat during the first act of Season 1, especially Episode 1, because this is the heart of the politics of Arcane. So first we have episode 1, which is of course the most important episode when it comes to establishing the dynamic between Zahn and Piltover. The first taste we get of this is, as I said, the opening scene. In that scene, we learn that the conflict between the regions is violent, or has gotten to that point. We learn that Piltover is the side that has the police in their pocket. Notice how all the Zahnites on the bridge had hardly any weapons and no armor compared to the full body armor of the enforcers. Piltover is at an advantage. Piltover has police and military power. This is only further shown in the very next scene, which takes place years later, where Vi, Powder, Milo, and Clagger go to Piltover for their heist. This scene tells us a lot as well. The plot, the environment, and the dialogue
You think anyone topside's going hungry?
all paint a picture that Zahn is poor and Piltover is wealthy, that they are two regions of one city, even though we all just refer to them as two cities. And when the crew goes back down to Zahn, we further get an idea of the state of Zahn's destitution. It seems to be a rundown, overcrowded place, but also vibrant and lively. We see a brothel, which many of the things I have to say about that are better left for later.
Yeah, so a yordle prostitute. And who she's for. I hope this is her. Because it's so honestly funny.
Later on in the episode, we learn that Vander has a deal with the sheriff of the enforcers, that they stay out of each other's business, or actually that the enforcers don't come down to Zahn as long as Zahnites don't go into Piltover. A pretty one-sided deal, but I digress. So overall, episode 1 lets us know that things are tense between Zahn and Piltover. There was at least one violent conflict between them in the past, and Piltover holds the power over Zahn. Episode 1 also shows us that Piltover and Zahn, or the Undercity, are separated by a river. This is a change from the way that League of Legends depicts the two cities, where Piltover is literally on top of Zahn, and this change says a lot about the show's politics as well, but I'll discuss that in a later section of this video. Moving on to episode 2, this episode really introduces us to some of the other key factors fleshing out the world of Piltover, namely the Council, which is the governing body of Piltover. Piltover's council is very privileged and very prejudiced. We get scenes with the Kiramans and Mel Medarda showing the wealth of Piltover. The council very clearly does not give a shit about the Undercity, only caring about keeping a feeling of safety for Piltover. We also see more of the enforcers, and one of them uses what is very obviously a derogatory term, trencher, towards a Zaunite, and we also see unnecessary force, or at least intimidation, from the enforcers, given that 4 of them are questioning a Zaunite who is already restrained by one of them, and we see another one push a Zaunite very harshly. And when that Zaunite spits on Marcus's shoe, they are thrown into Vi and Co.'s hideout, and their hideout is then searched with no due process like a warrant of any kind. We also don't see Vi and Co. complain about that little fact, leading us to believe that this is typical and perhaps just simply the way things go. Grayson's little line in this episode about how they've frozen commerce for half the district again demonstrates Piltover's economic power over the Undercity, a power that is enforced by their police. So, you with me so far? The first act of Arcane sets up 2 very unequal societies between Zahn and Piltover. Piltover has power over Zahn, and the enforcers are their tools to enact that power. Piltover looks down on Zahn. Piltover is wealthy and privileged, while Zahn is destitute. The rest of Season 1 tells us all of this yet again in so many different ways. For example, Vi's imprisonment. She's thrown into still water with no process, no paperwork, no crime, no trial. And given that Caitlyn doesn't even react to this information at first, I have to assume that this isn't even an uncommon occurrence. At the very least,
Right, I gotta talk about Vice imprisonment. So, I know that this is probably common occurrence, but like Vi is not a great example for that. I know that there weren't any other example to give, but um, yeah, I know she's technically right. But Vi was imprisoned because Marcus didn't want to kill her. And Marcus knew that if Silco knew that she was alive, he would want him to kill her. But yeah, What she says is technically true.
Least, the fact that it can happen is more than enough evidence of the kind of extreme authority enforcers can wield against Zonites. And we can compare this to what Jace went through in episode 2. Jace's holding cell had a bed, blankets, books, a window, a table. Stillwater is Stillwater. Also, Jace got a trial. Vi got nothing. The rest of season 1 also gives us plenty more examples of the prejudice that Piltovians have towards Zonites. And then there's a couple of other small things we learn as well, such as Zahn not really having anything in the way of medical treatment outside of Shimmer, the poisonous gas that's in the mining fissures, and that Silco blackmails Marcus to make sure enforcers don't poke around in his business, but deal with his enemies. This is so he can consolidate his control of the Undercity as he's biding his time to force the independence issue with Piltover. And then, of course, the season ends with Jinx killing Silco and blowing up the council when they vote for Zahn's independence.
Okay, so my mom came in with clothes, and my microphone, and she didn't close the door properly because she don't know what that means, and my microphone just fell off. So, all right. But what she says is just true. She basically, like said the entire history of the conflict and made quite right assumptions. So yeah.
I've given a pretty detailed recap about what Season 1 said about the dynamic between Piltover and Zahn, and we already know that Season 1 was loved for a variety of reasons. The character writing, the fight scenes, the animation, the great use of music, but a lot of people also loved the political commentary of the show, or what we thought the political commentary was. So, why did people think Season 1 was leftist, or that it at least contained some left-leaning political commentary? Well, first, there was the opening scene. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but this is a very clear and obvious depiction about the brutality of policing, and like I said earlier, it tells us that the show is
Sure. When I first watched this thing, I didn't watch it as, as that this show is a political commentary. I just watched this scene because, that just turned on the show. Um, so I just watched this scene and thought, so there is a conflict, and they both kill each other. Like, I didn't see it as police brutality, but maybe as just police being provoked to brutality. You know what I mean? Um, she's going to later confuse Marxism with leftism, which are two not that different things. All Marxists are leftists, and not all leftists are Marxists.
going to
But
be handling
she doesn't understand that, and she's also a Zononite fascist. So you just have to see this.
this topic. Given what else happens during Season 1, this seems like a fair assumption, so that's the first reason. Another reason was Vi's character, specifically some of the lines of dialogue she had. She was a burgeoning little revolutionary in Act 1, more on this later, and then in Act 2 and 3, she was reading Pilties left and right. She calls Caitlyn out for being an enforcer, she calls out the council's inaction, being why someone like Silco is allowed to rise in Zahn, she calls Jace out for threatening to send her to jail, she calls attention to the relations between Piltover and Zahn. Considering that Vi was essentially our follow along character, kind of, having her be the one to provide all this commentary was a good sign for Arcane's leftist politics. It also helped that Vi was so different than her League counterpart, who, from my understanding, is, or at least was at some point, just police brutality personified. That they made all of these changes to her seemed to indicate that perhaps this show would be giving a take on her character much more steeped in political commentary. Next is Echo's entire character. Now, Little Man actually is a revolutionary, a collectivist. Echo's fire
No, he's a socialist. He's a communist. Just look at how the Firelight base operates. They are all just sharing each other all the necessary things. Like there is not there's no capitalism in the Firelight. You know, base. This is what I also noticed while watching the show. He's a communist.
Lights are as much vigilantes as they are almost a
Okay.
mutual aid commune of sorts. Echo has the will to fight for his people and will put aside his own reservations if it means guaranteeing their safety. He also reads Caitlin for filth, which is always a plus. He criticizes both Silco and the Enforcer slash Piltover, and like Savika, he is a character that is clearly interested in the well-being of Zahn. Then there was Caitlin. Her arc in season 1 was essentially that of a privileged person becoming an ally to a struggle of the marginalized, and many speculated that season 2 would see her go to the next level of allyship, which could have entailed
Yeah. So many that speculated don't know the lore. Like if they blew up your mom, if someone blew up your mom, would you A, hate them, B, like them, C, going to still defend them because it's technically not their whole fault, or D, wants to kill that exact person and not the entire city because Caitlyn chose D at first. But yeah, I need to go to school, so uh,
many things, each
goodbye, I guess.